So I wanted to start my talk with a story, just a little something for everyone to get to know me a bit more. Over the summer, I had the opportunity to shadow the city manager of Fairborn, Ohio for a week. Now, this was a great experience for me, and it really solidified my passion for a career in local government. The people I got to meet and the behind-the-scenes look I got to take at local government was inspiring, and I also learned a lot. To be honest, I feel like I kind of learned a concerning amount. There was so much that I didn't know about local governments and so many services that I didn't know local governments provided that I kind of felt like a fake political science major. Throughout my time, I got to talk with the city planner, the city manager, and the city civil engineer. I got to tour both the water management and the waste treatment plant and ride along with police and fire. I also got to meet all members of city council. Now, maybe you're sitting there and you're going, wow, that sounds like the worst week ever. And that's understandable. I mean, most people don't willingly interact with bureaucracy. However, I'm telling you all this because it was an eye-opening experience for me. It not only provided me with a better understanding of what local governments do and why they're important, but it also pointed out to me the lack of public understanding about and interaction with local governments. Today, I want to discuss what I believe are three major factors contributing to our societal lack of engagement with local government. One, a clear understanding of what exactly local governments are and what they do. Two, confusion about what barriers exist to engagement at the local level and how to overcome these. And three, a deep recognition of why engagement with local governments is so important. So, what exactly are local governments then? Broadly speaking, the US Census defines a government as an organized entity which, in addition to having governmental character, has sufficient discretion in the management of its own affairs to distinguish it as separate from any other administrative structure of any other governmental unit. So, if you're like me, maybe you find that definition a little bit vague and not helpful, but using it, they counted 90,075 local governments in the United States. Local governments are state-funded and oversee counties, cities, or towns. They come in all shapes and sizes, but tend to fall into three main categories listed from largest to smallest. You have county governments, municipal governments, and then town or township governments. It's important to note that when I say local governments throughout the speech, there are multiple different styles and organization types that can fall under this label. Now, that being said, why do we have 90,075 local governments? And what do they do that's so important that it can't be consolidated into a state or a federal government? Now, local governments provide a wide variety of services that are unique to the community they're working for and that are instrumental to the functioning of society. These services include trash recycling, animal control, water and sewage treatment, city planning and development, police and fire, road maintenance, libraries, education, economic development, and parks and recreational facilities. Not included on this list are things like local judiciary services and local legislation. Based on this list alone, it's obvious that what local governments do have a high impact on our life. These services are close to home and impact daily life in a way that's unique from other levels of government. A clear example of this can be found by looking at the local government budget. Urban Institute notes that local governments spend almost 40% of their budget on education alone. The next greatest priority switches between police, roads, and health and hospitals. Now, these services that I just listed have a high impact on all people living in a community, and by a large extent are controlled by local governments. The implementation of local government services varies between each separate municipality, as each specific service is catered uniquely to the community that it's serving. Along with that, these services are necessary for a high quality of life. So, local governments do some important things, and as voters and citizens, I'm sure that we pay attention to the ways that local governments impact our lives, and therefore actively engage with it, right? Yeah, no. So, according to the National Civic League, voter turnout in local elections ranges from 15 to 27% of eligible voters. Guys, that's really bad. The people elected and appointed into local government offices have control over all of the services I just listed, and yet only 15 to 27% of people are showing up to vote in these elections. According to the same article, this 15 to 27% is not a representative sample of all the people that are living in a community. Affluent voters are 30 to 60% more likely to vote in a local election than low-income voters. And those who are 65 plus are 7 times more likely to vote in a local election than younger voters. While these divides, especially in things like the age of voters, can be seen at all election levels, they become amplified at the local level simply because there are less people voting. Local election outcomes tend to sit in the hands of a select few, simply because people aren't engaging at the local level. At the federal level, according to Pew Research, in the 2020 election, voter turnout was 66%. Now, that's pretty good, and while there's still room for improvement, that's significantly higher than what you see at the local level. At the state level, things tend to vary a bit more, but in 2023, the Ohio Secretary of State reported a voter turnout of 49.63%, so just below half. Now, looking at these numbers, we can see that as level of government decreases, so does voter turnout, and it becomes necessary to look at some of the reasons behind this trend. The biggest and most obvious reason stems back to the amount of media coverage that each level gets. Federal politics get the most media coverage, and it makes sense. This level has the largest constituency and deals with bigger and more widespread issues than any of the other levels. The same thing can be said for state politics. The things happening at the state level are usually relevant to a larger amount of people than most things that are happening at the local level. While the level of media coverage that each level gets makes sense, it becomes an issue as that news is the only news that people get. Local issues get coverage, but they're never as widespread or easily accessible as the other levels. This leaves many citizens unaware of the happenings of their local government, and come election time, this lack of awareness translates to poor participation at the ballot box. People will spend lots of time researching their state and federal candidates and policy issues, which is a good thing. You should be doing that, but that's especially so because these candidates and elections are widely advertised. People will spend little to no time researching their local candidates and issues, if they even show up to vote, simply because they are unaware of what's happening at the local level. They fail to give these candidates and issues the same care and attention they give to their federal counterparts, even though these people are likely to have a higher direct impact on their life. While most voter turnout issues at the local level stem from a lack of knowledge about elections, the general lack of education surrounding local government function and services also contributes to this low turnout. In school, students are taught mostly about the federal government and then a little bit about their specific state. Local government structure and function is not taught in regular K-12 schooling. I'm taking my first class focused on local government, and I'm a second-year political science major. Part of the reason that people aren't showing up to local government elections is because they don't understand what local governments do and why that's so important, but they do understand the importance when it comes to other levels of government. Now, before I dive into some strategies for engaging at the local level and overcoming some of these challenges, it's necessary to understand why this engagement is so important in the first place. Now, engagement at all levels of government is important and your civic duty as a citizen. However, I want to highlight why it is specifically important at the local level. One of the biggest reasons stems back to the low election turnout at local levels, but also population size in general. Local governments serve the smallest constituency of people, and combine that with low election turnout, and you've got like 5 people per county voting in their local elections. Okay, 5 is probably a bit dramatic, but you still have significantly less people participating in these elections than you do at other levels. As a result, each vote cast holds more weight, simply because there's less votes present at that level. Now, before I continue, I just want to say, your vote matters at all levels of government, so don't misinterpret what I'm saying here and assume that it doesn't matter at other levels. It does. But when you look at the numbers involved, by simply being an educated voter in your local election, you are able to have a substantial impact on your community. And really, this goes for anything regarding local governments. Engagement, not only through voting, but through volunteering or attending city council meetings, is so low throughout all local government-related things that by simply showing up, you can have such a large impact. And besides just being able to have a large impact, you also get to engage and help solve problems that are relevant to you and your specific community. Engaging locally isn't something that's far away or irrelevant. It's a way for you to directly have a positive impact on your community and the people around you. Now, some of the restrictions I mentioned regarding local engagement are harder to tackle, like including local governments in educational curriculum, although I'm sure your school board would love to hear your ideas. However, others like keeping up on current events are a lot easier. Actually, one of the easiest ways to be civically engaged at any level is to be informed. As I mentioned earlier, federal and state news sources are easier to come by, but local news sources exist and are a great way to stay up to date on local happenings. However, I want to encourage your local government engagement to go beyond just reading the news. One easy place to start is your local government's town or city council or school board meetings. When I was in Fairborn, I was one of 5 people who was at their city council meeting, and I didn't even live there. Going to city council is a great way to gather information about what's happening in your community, and are also a great place to voice your concerns directly to your local elected officials. And besides just city council, local governments also have boards or commissions, so things like Parks and Rec, or Historical Preservation, or the Zoning Board. And these also hold public meetings. These meetings are a great place to gather information on a specific area of your community that you're interested in. And the people who are sitting at those meetings would be happy to talk with you and collaborate on something that you're interested in. If you can't make it to those meetings, reach out to your local elected officials. Local officials love to collaborate and hear from their constituents, probably because it doesn't happen very much. Another great way to get involved in your local government is to volunteer. Lots of those boards and commissions that I mentioned also have volunteer opportunities, especially things like Parks and Rec. There are also government partners like animal shelters or food banks that are always looking for volunteers. You can even get involved in the upcoming election by working as a poll worker or campaigning for a local candidate. There are so many ways to get involved in your local government, and I hope some of the things I've shared have inspired you to get engaged. The wonderful thing about local governments is that you don't have to travel to DC or your state capital to make your voice heard. You don't have to have a lot of money or lots of connections. You don't even need to take loads of time out of your day. You can start small. You can talk with your local officials who would love to hear from you. You can attend city council or volunteer. Your voice and your engagement at the local level are so important, and getting involved doesn't have to be big or overwhelming. You can start small and still make a big difference by engaging with your local government. Thank you.